be clear, AI is actually not new. If you break the tool, you find the glitches in the games. It's like having a genie in your palm. Promise you, a year from now, go back and listen to this podcast. You will see how much different the world's going to look.
How you doing? How you feeling?
I'm doing well. Blessed. How you feeling?
I'm feeling good.
Yeah?
I'm so happy to have you here.
I'm happy to be here.
Like, you're the first male who has graced this couch on my podcast.
And now the pressure's on right now.
Yeah, you better deliver, because the women been delivering.
Ooh, man.
Okay?
Man. Look, hey, I'm going to do what I can do.
Yes.
And all I can do is deliver. So that's
Right. Okay, well, let's introduce it so people know who you are, who I am. Y'all know who I am. My name is Markiesha Patrice. I'm your host of MindShifts. This is us taking a look at technology, how it's changing, how it can change your lives, and how you're using it today. With me today is one of my friends, one of my technologist friends, Cavaughn Noel. So, Cavaughn, do you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Hey, everybody, my name is Cavaughn. Been in tech for about 24 years now.
See, you aging yourself because of the gray. I wasn't going to do all of that.
I mean, I might have started when I was 10, right? You never know.
There you go.
So I've been in tech for quite some time. So starting from, I was interning at Technologies as a change manager. So I kind of skipped levels as a manager after college, and kind of went from there into my tech journey. Should I just go in deeper?
Yeah, go deeper.
Right,
Let
cool.
them know. Give the credentials, baby.
All right,
Let's go.
all right. So, I mean, from there, I worked there as a change manager for 2 years, and then I went to business school at NYU Stern. Shout out to my Sternies.
Hey.
And I focus more on the marketing strategy side because I really want to get closer to the customer, right? At Lucent, it was more back end. At Stern, it was focused on the customer. So after Stern, actually focus more on product marketing, product management at startup companies. So helping some startups to kind of scale their businesses. We're focused on retention, acquisition efforts. As we know, those are the biggest metrics, right?
Absolutely.
For businesses. So, I'm very sort of passionate about the customer journey as it's juxtaposed with technology, right? So where innovation and context of the innovation connects with the customer journey and the context, right? So a lot of what I did thereafter was focus on helping businesses that were looking to evolve out of their space to sort of transition out. So like one of the roles I had was working at a startup where they were literally trying to build the business from soup to nuts.
Right.
And get their...
What does soup to nuts mean for the audience?
Right.
We're starting to use tech terms.
I know.
What does that mean?
I mean, so essentially it's, it's like, all right, it's a concept, it's early stage. And how do you get it from just a concept out to the market and actually have people using it and sort of flourishing? So, there's a term called escape velocity, which is something used in science pretty often. But in tech, it's like where you have this sort of revolution of uses. And at a certain point, it's used so frequently, the product sort of like runs out of its own orbit.
Yep.
So in science, that if a meteor or an object does that, it hits escape velocity because it gets out of the orbit, right, into its own orbit. So how do we do that for more companies? And that's kind of one of the things I was focused on for a while over the past, the 10 years after business school.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm glad to hear that because I think that's where we align, is we have so many similar interests. Because I went to Boston University though. So, the New York BU, the New York-Boston rivalry. It doesn't go the college way, though, so we can still be homies.
I mean, are you a Boston fan, sports fan? That's kind of...
See, I am, and I don't want to give your Knicks any smoke because, that's a different podcast. We're not going to do that today.
All right,
we're going to keep the focus on AI and technology.
Sure, we can do that.
Because we're going to get another ring anyway, so I just got to slip that in there.
Awesome.
So... but no, I think we do have a lot of the similarities in terms of like our experiences and what we've done. Because for me, I jumped right into tech after school as well, after university as well. And my experience was all about the user experience, the customer experience, the product, escaping velocity, absolutely. And so I want to kind of talk to you about what was that like maybe before the introduction of AI into consumer, because AI is still new. So we were doing some things a lot differently before the AI came along.
Yeah. So I mean, let me be clear. AI is actually not new. It's just the interface of AI is new, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's both the sort of more AI now has a face to it.
Yes.
There's a term called GUI, right? Graphic user interface. So like AI has a better GUI with sort of like backend components that readily propel it forward, right? So, components like, LLMs, right? So
Yes.
large language models that actually give you the data that make and drive the AI forward, right? So, a lot of our video games and other tools are AI focused, right? Or AI driven. They're just AI sort of in the back behind the scenes. Now, kind of the past couple of years, AI is like, let me walk up to the front, right? Kind of like thinking like Neo, right? Neo,
Yeah.
He's making songs for people in the background. Now he's an artist, right?
Oh, I thought you meant Neo from The Matrix. See, my mind was
See, look,
somewhere
look.
completely different.
Like I was being
like-
metaphorical from a whole different plane.
Okay.
But I mean, if you just think about sort of like, sort of the engine, like where the engine operates and where it's seen, right? Now it's
Right.
seen a bit more in the forefront with ChatGPT, with Claude, with all the other sort of AI tools. It makes it easier for a customer to kind of adopt it,
Right.
So if you juxtapose, the two revolutions that happened kind of similar, the NFT revolution, quote unquote, and then the AI, they happen kind of like in a similar way, right? You had things like Clubhouse kind of perpetuating it. The only difference is AI had a stronger adoption because it actually solved the problems without people have to explain what it does, right? Or what it can do.
Right. They're able to see it instantaneously.
Exactly.
Like you get to type into a prompt and it will spit something out to you. And so I think like that, even that ability was so crucial because you get to see users see their own light, their own visions, their own ideas come to life instantaneously.
Exactly.
It was like the microwave effect, like 100x.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, it's like having a genie in your palm, right? And funny enough, back in the day, we used to have something called Game Genie, right? Where you needed the cheat code for your video games. Boom.
Right.
It gave you all the algorithms or code to get to what you need. So similarly, like, this is the new cheat code, right?
Right.
This is the new Game Genie where essentially, you can plug in a prompt. And sort of the interesting is a lot of the people that are just good at creating vernacular, like, I won't say POC because I'm laying that word down. But, young kids that are kind of playing around with language, they're the future prompt engineers because they're manipulating languages in a way that, people never could, right?
Right.
So the question is, how do we sort of juxtapose their abilities to manipulate language through the arts, through rap, through hip hop, if you will,
Right.
through other sort of genres into prompt engineering, where you can sort of create prompts that align with the vernacular of the large
Yeah.
language model, right?
Yeah, and I kind of want to back up because I think we're driving fast, but I want to back up a little bit because I think we are on the cusp. So there's this thing about cycles. There's like every 5 years, something like a society kind of their mentality shifts where things that happened 5 years ago, they you almost forget that they happened because they're not in the forefront of your mind.
Right.
So many other events have happened to where you're forgetting. Like even when we think about our lives of going outside and playing tag and just being like before we were living on, people were doing live streams and whatnot. We were outside in a different way, really interacting with each other. And now we almost forget those days. Like they're nostalgic to us, but they're not even in our memory set almost when we're talking about, oh, what are you trying to do outside? Nobody's like, oh, I'm going to try to go play tag with my friends. They're saying, oh, I'm going to a party. I'm going to do whatever, I'm going to a game or whatever.
Right.
And so with AI, we're almost reaching that stage where we're kind of almost forgetful of what did the world look like before it?
Exactly. And the thing with, technology, it's funny you mentioned shifts. The technology is usually around every 10 years. There's sort of like an oscillation of technology, whether it's sort of it gets easier in some way, but then you have a new sort of piece that shifts, we're talking about mind shift, like it shifts your mind in a different way. So when that new technology launches, it shifts kind of the market in a different way. And then, it probably sort of integrates with that 5 year thing where it's like, well, maybe 5 years from that 10-year shift, then people's minds start shifting a different way in how they're sort of adopting it in society, right?
Right. And I want to ask you a question too around the mind shift for yourself, right? Do you remember the moment where you're like, oh, I need to be paying attention to this AI thing?
Yeah. I mean, the moment I first used ChatGPT and it spit out something that would probably take me a week. I forget the prompt it was exactly. I wish I should have saved it. The hello world.
I know we definitely needed to do that.
That's one of the things you would frame. Like, all right,
Right.
this is my first prompt. 10 years from now, that you can show your kids, right?
Right.
No, so, but the first time I use it, and the first time I saw other people use it, and kind of in their use cases. So I'm a nerd about, sort of product use cases, right? And it being digested and adopted. So when I first seen it used in medicine, my friends that are in medicine that never use technology, and they told me about sort of how it saved them days from the work they had in their medical records, or, my teacher friends, right? And then even in education where kids are using it, it's like, okay, well, now we have a solution, but now we're creating more problems in a good way. Now we have to sort of like pay attention in a different way, right? So I've always been an advocate for getting sort of the marginalized community, if you will, as an aggregate into new technological spaces. So when I did see it come out, my automatic instinct was to make sure that I sort of became an ambassador for it, one, and then secondly, making sure that it was readily available to people that look like me, and people that sort of needed it, that probably would have access to it otherwise. Because at a certain point, large language models, they're programmable, right? So whoever programs it has control. And if there are people that are in verticals that are closer to the problem that they're trying to solve and they don't have access to the LLMs that are being built, then there's a larger problem ahead, right? So the question is, how do we sort of close that gap?
So it sounds like it started with like, whoa, I had my aha moment of what this thing can do. And then your gut instinct was, okay, more people where I come from, people who look like me, they need this because I see what the opportunity is. But at the same time, not just for the opportunity, but so that we are included in the future of where this goes.
Right. And you made a very critical point, right? Because there's two things. One is, hey, jump on and solve your problems using AI.
Yeah.
The second thing is be included at the table, because we all don't know where it's going to go, but be at the table so that we can drive, our car too, right?
Yeah.
Because, it's sort of the operational part where it's internal. The other part is sort of external, right?
Yeah.
So
I see that too. So again, you and I, we have similar experiences where I started in tech not a couple years ago, but a little over a decade ago.
Right.
And it was a similar challenge. A similar challenge that we were trying to solve is, how do we get more diversity in tech?
Right.
And that was a big problem, not just so that we could like feel accepted and feel like we fit in and feel like we can look to our left and our right and have people who we're familiar with in the room. But I think where I always saw it is because we need to be a part of shaping how this economy, there's a whole tech economy that is being derived, and we need to be able to participate in that.
Right.
And I think and that's always been my why too, of getting into it, because I have a curiosity. Like me, it's always been the curiosity. It's like, oh, what is this? What does that do? Right. And I always want to just be in the room to see, to like find out for myself. And so that curiosity has led me from SaaS tech startups to blockchain, crypto to AI. And I think every time I go through and I have those experiences, I'm learning new things and new ways to adopt the tech and new ways that this can build wealth. I know everybody has a wealth conversation, but we're not even talking about wealth from like an investment perspective. We're talking about wealth from like a building and ownership and generating more wealth on top of that opportunity. And I think sometimes that is missed too. Like people are they rush to the job opportunity. And I think what AI has actually done is it doesn't make me necessarily want to just go find a job. It makes me want to go see what I can build.
Exactly.
And I think that's a critical mind shift that this technology can open up if you allow it to, really.
Right. And I like you said that because, you know, it democratizes, like, you know, prior to this, the starting line was back here for a lot of us, while everyone else's was, you know, maybe a mile ahead. Right. Now we can all start at the same starting line and maybe even have our own sort of like, you know, engine driving us forward even faster if we kind of know the cheat codes on our own, right?
Hey, it's me, Markiesha Patrice, your host of MindShifts. I know that you like the conversations we're having. I know that you like the guests that we're talking to. So why haven't you subscribed? Make sure you comment, like, and subscribe so that you never miss an episode of MindShifts.
You know, so for example, I went to Grenada, you know, fan from Grenada.
I was just about to ask. Go ahead, rep your set.
All right, you know, I had to rep the set, you know. 473, shout out to the fam. Yeah, I went out there last year. They brought me out there to speak about kind of, you know, the evolution of AI and kind of how it can apply to the country, right? And I think it's important to realize that, you know, the shifts can happen just from the implementation of a concept, right? So, you know, at that time, it was more so focused on prompt engineering, how you sort of leverage prompt engineering. But, you know, like I told them at that time, I said, look, a year from now, it's hard to predict exactly where things are going to be, right? Like you can predict where you're going to be in that journey, but then society might be different. However, what is critical is that you're a part of that ride. Because otherwise you'll be left behind and, you know, your next generation is going to be left behind and the whole country is going to be left behind, right? So how do we make sure that, you know, let's say, for example, Grenada as a country does not get left behind in this revolution and the evolution of technology because it can reshape the velocity of growth for the country in many ways. Right. Across discipline, across industries, and across, you know, everything scientific and mathematical, right?
Right. I think that's interesting too because it comes down, what I hear isn't just about the awareness of it, like knowing that it exists. I also hear is like, how do we use it to create change? And so my question for you is, how are you using it? What tools are you using specifically to create change, to build with, maybe beyond the ChatGPTs of the world, but are there any other very powerful AI tools that you get to use and that you're using to build with and to build for basically other communities that you're a part of?
Yeah, so for example, one thing I also want to mention is tool aside, I think we also have to kind of pull back on the dependence of tools first before actually figuring out the problem you're trying to solve. Right? So I did a workshop at an AI conference last week, actually sort of using Seth Godin's methodology of Purple Cow.
Yep.
Sort of applied it to
Mastermind.
You know, the integration of AI at a future state.
Right.
And it went super well, you know, because the idea is how do we strip apart everything you know about AI and just get back to the basic of you, the equation of you, the problem you're trying to solve, the industry you're trying to solve it at and with at scale, right? Because at scale is the word, the silent phrase that I think a lot of people are missing, right? You're doing something in time X, but time X plus Y, and at scale, what does that look like, right? So for a teacher at scale, what does education look like if you sort of multiply that person? And if AI was a wraparound, right? No matter what the tool is, like what's the gap that AI would solve, and then how you back in a tool that might be sort of congruent to that gap.
Right.
Right. So, you know, I'm big on equations, and when I was teaching product and go-to-market strategy, I'd make sure my students would focus on their equation from a scientific approach, not from sort of this macro sort of just hypotheticals. Like, all right, well, what are the actual variables? When you started trying to solve this problem, what was the core mission? Let's say a teacher, the goal.
It's like first principles. Right.
Right. And then you figure out where AI sort of is a wraparound or sort of integration that solves a problem, right?
So it sounds like it's starting with, so before you get into the tools, and you're right, and I'm glad that you backed up a bit. Before you're getting into the tools, try to figure out what problem do you want to solve, right? And if you figure out the problem you want to solve, it's like creating an equation of what are the variables. So what are the things that need to happen or that go into solving this problem? And then how can I leverage technology? How can I leverage AI to affect these variables?
Yeah, because if you focus on the tool, and this is why, I did that exercise, and like I said, it went really well because a lot of people just focus on the tools because the tool might go out of business next year.
Yeah.
AI is so quick that I guarantee you there's going to be three times more tools next year. So the question is, what is the actual deliverable that the tools are offering, and which ones are doing the best? And then how do you back that out into the equation that you were trying to solve initially, right? By making sure that you're still aligned sort of asymptotically to the actual goal.
Right.
So if your goal is, let's say you have a line going this way, you have the curve trying to get asymptotic to the line, like what's sort of that gap keeping you from getting closer to the line, right? And how can AI solve the problem instead of using AI? Because like I said, large language models, depending on the tool, they have hallucinations, right? Where it kind of like...
What's a hallucination?
It's sort of where, you sort of yield a prompt, but that it doesn't give you the right output, right? It sort of...
It kind of gives you gibberish back. Sometimes it gives you like jumbled gibberish back.
Right. So, it's... Now, and this is why, also why you got to know sort of what you're trying to find, because if you break the tool, which you should be trying to break any new tool.
That is such a developer thing to say.
Right.
Because like some people are not trying to break the tool. They just want to use it for what it's meant for.
Right.
Okay.
But if you're, if you take the gamer mindset, right?
Yeah.
You try to Streetfighter, Mortal Kombat. You try to get us.
What are all these game references? Let me pull out my Nintendo.
Right. So I mean, if you think about it, right? You try to get as best as you can at the game, and let's say you're playing somebody, their expert level, your expert level. At a certain point, you have to like have that little iota above them.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get so great that you find the glitches in the game that make you that much better because you figure out, oh, there's a glitch on that screen where your arm can wrap around the other screen, which happen in Tekken often, right? So similar with the large language models, it's like, how do you try to break the model where you figure out, okay, well, there's a limit, right?
Yeah.
To what it can do in terms of scope of prompt requests, right?
Yeah.
Because, and that's why we need more people at the table because, all right, boom, you figure out how to break it. Maybe you should be inside creating it.
Right.
So that it works for you and it doesn't break, right?
Yeah. One of my favorite things to do is hit the prompt limit. That's my favorite thing to do because once I hit it, I'm like, oh, okay. So we've gone as far as we can go. Like there's a coding app. It's a prompt to code app called Replit. And what it allows you to do is you get to go in and basically generate an app and say, hey, I want to build an app that books my hair appointments, on its own. And I can feed a bunch of information and it'll output a app. And it's not the best app. It's not like it still has to be looked at by an engineer to make sure the coding works and all the things, but you do it enough times where you're editing it, you're like, I want this new feature, you're doing it enough times, eventually you're gonna hit that prompt limit because I am not a developer, right? I coded in my MySpace days and that's about where it stayed. But I'm still curious. I still want to build things. I still want to create with things. So I use that. I use Midjourney too. Like I think Midjourney is another one of those where like I hit the prompt limit immediately. Like I had to pay for it because I was like, okay, this isn't right. But the point there is not just to hit the prompt limit, but it's to hit it more efficiently. It's like you want to get closer and closer to the target every single time. And that's why your example about creating a equation of what are you trying to solve and what are the variables that help solve that. When you understand the inputs, it's like input output.
Exactly.
So the better information that you input, the better the prompting engineering that you do, the more you know about generating images. About, like, if you're a photographer, I feel like they're the best people who can generate images.
Right.
An illustrator, an animator, like they are like the top of the top.
Right.
You know, somebody who's an extremely well writer, their writing that they get out of an LLM, OpenAI, Anthropic, what have you, their writing is just that much better, right? And also they can correct the prompting to say, I don't want it to sound like this, or don't have sentences structured in this way.
Exactly.
And I think like that's the other part that I feel sometimes goes understudied and under discussed, is having that level of expertise to say, I know enough to where I can put myself in this shoes and just take my expertise and like level it up, right?
Right. So like, in tech where, we have the term sort of creating a risky hypothesis, right?
Yes.
That could apply so well to AI as well, right? So like if you're prompting and you're like, all right, well, the risky hypothesis said if I prompt it this way, or you create the hypothesis and you test it as many times as you need to either prove it right or wrong.
Right.
If that risky hypothesis is false, then anything else you do kind of around that effort, you just dub it, right?
Right.
So the goal is to make sure you have the right variables, like the right controlled variables, so that when you go back to the test site, if it's doing a prompt, then kind of like what not to have to do.
Yeah.
You failed enough. You know what the failing sort of equation looks like.
Right.
So all the risky hypotheses are sort of, you throw to the wayside, and that's kind of how you break the that's how you figure out the LLM. It's like a piano player that's learning how to play on it on their own. They're like, all right, well, this is how it sounds. You're just figuring out, okay, well, this is how I create a chord, right, from the bottom up. Now, if you do it enough times with enough, now you're creating sort of melodies and music, right?
Right.
So how do you sort of figure out the dissonance in the LLM prompt creating process, but the prompt creating process in I can't say the word.
LLM.
Right. Say that 20 times fast.
Right.
Everybody listen, say that
Every
20. How do you do that so that you sort of limit the amount or minimize the amount of times you have to fail in the prompt creation process?
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, all right, break it faster, but break it with less prompts.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been very informative. I feel like we've talked a lot about the tech. I feel like we've gone very deep into like just how to think about this, right? I think that's the most important thing is there's so much we can do with it. But I love your piece about figuring out the problem to solve. Because AI can't solve everything, right? It's not meant to, not right now. So having something specific and distinctive that you want to solve is so important. So I just want to say, any other things that you want to give to the audience today? Maybe tell them about how they can get started. Really, like, how are you going to spawn their next mind shift?
As regards to AI?
Yeah.
I'd say just start from where you are, right? Figure out the problem you're trying to solve, and where you're looking to be. So, just take a second after this podcast, figure out where you're looking to be in the next 5-10 years, and understand that AI is going to be involved in some way, deeply. Remove AI as sort of the contributing value, but just figure out, okay, well, this is where I want to be. Now, how could I be there with my own superpower? But then how do I make that superpower scale with AI?
Yeah.
And then figure out sort of what's needed to get to that next level. Because between this and next year, I promise you, a year from now, go back and listen to this podcast. You will see how much different the world's going to look with AI. I did that last year, and everyone said I was right? So now it's like, okay, well, this is going to be even more exponential.
Right.
So figure out sort of what resources you have around you, whether it's human resources or AI tools, that might be able to solve your problem. But figure out the problem and create the right solutions or right equation that can kind of get you to your solution.
Yeah. I love that. And I guess I'm gonna give a mind shift. I usually don't. I usually let let it go. But I really appreciate something that you said, not just from the starting with a problem, but also I want to encourage people to not just solve a problem for yourself, but solve a problem for the world. Solve a problem that can, to your point, scale. Solve a problem that will do the most good for the most people. Because I think that if we use this technology for good, we have a less chance of it being used and actually acted upon for bad.
Exactly.
So that's me being an internal optimist. Who knows? But thank you again. Cavaughn, where can they find you?
You can find me. My first name is very findable at Cavaughn, so at Cavaughn on pretty much every platform, on Instagram, on not on that app, but pretty much on most platforms. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm also sort of in the process of building my next startup,
Yes.
which has an AI wraparound as well.
Wait, which wraparound are you using? Are you OpenAI API?
Yeah, so using OpenAI, the API, but kind of using it as a wraparound for one of the solutions, right?
Okay.
And when I say wraparound, it's kind of like it's less of a sort of a full driving, right? So I'm actually a student of my own sort of pedagogy, where I'm actually solving the problem mostly without AI now.
Yeah.
And using AI as sort of one of the sort of last mile sort of solutions.
We got to talk. I might have some tools for you. So I'm building, my company's building a AI infrastructure. So we can do fine tuning of models. We have models, open source models, data sets, compute all in one place. So we should definitely talk.
Let's do it. Collaboration's the only way to win, right?
Open source AI is the only way to win.
Listen. And a year from now, like we'll talk about a year from now, open source and sort of coding languages are going to be way more advanced.
Yeah.
Where, I always said the product manager is going to be the developer.
Yeah.
And design thinking is going to be critical across the stack, across the design stack, across the dev stack, right? Because it'll be way more streamlined in terms of the build out phase. So it's more so just going to be how you sort of envision the execution piece and the go-to-market effort. And a lot of that lies on the product manager, kind of connects to the design thinking of, let's say, a graphic designer, right?
Right.
So.
Awesome. All right. There you have it. This has been MindShifts. I'm your host, Markiesha Patrice, and I'll see you next time. Take care.